exposure effect.
Exploring resources.
Physical attractiveness is a beautiful and good effect. We think that people we are physically attracted to are competent communicators, they're also intelligent, they're also well-adjusted. It's a halo, right? I'm physically attracted to, I think, all.
Most of the websites also list how we're look those up. That might be something. And initiate a conversation or a discussion and ask them further. You know, how did you study or how did you work? How might it work?
Would you say it's safe to say that pretty much relatively every professor does research on campus? So if they were to approach their professor, they assume that they do research, or
not all. So we have some faculty on campus who are just full-time lecturers. They teach full-time. Others, such as I think all of us here, we teach, but we also do research. So it kind of depends, but if they don't do research, they may know someone that they work with.
And a lot of professors won't kind of be open about their research. I've noticed after getting involved in research, then talking to professors more about it, I realized, how did I didn't know you were involved in research, and I wish I would have known that. So I think taking that initiative to ask, because a lot of times you won't know. Otherwise. Thank you. For Dr. Gray, what general advice do you have for students in your field trying to get involved in research?
Sure. So I, as a nutrition educator, theory matters a lot to me, and I had a theoretical thought that related to this question. So I love theories that are easy to apply and easy to make sense. Years ago, I learned about this theory called transformative learning theory, and it connects with our head, our hands, and our heart. And so I use that a lot in my teaching to make sure that we're connecting with what people care about and how they think, what they do. So my advice is to be really curious. So that's the head part. Ask questions. What bothers you in the world? What's interesting you? What needs fixing? Just ask questions, and then, like these guys have said, go to places where people are talking about that. See other people presenting research, engage in conversations that allow that curiosity to explore. Then think about what you care about. So when we align what we do with what we care about, which is what I think drives most students into research, right? We want to do something about it. So think about how you can align what you care about with those questions you're asking. And then the hands part comes in. Skills, like develop skills that allow you to exercise that curiosity and care about in a way that's so dive in. I think conversations with students who are doing research, faculty who are doing research, even people outside of the research realm. Talk to just the people about it and find people that like talking about ideas. That's my favorite thing about working with students is they love talking about ideas. Share with some of you guys when we were traveling together this past November, we're at a train station waiting on public transportation, and kids are still like, hey, let's talk about this thing related to fat metabolism. Okay, let's do it. So find people that like that like to talk about ideas, dive in, research and gossip.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because that's really what being a scientist is having that curiosity and wanting to answer your questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. So next we'll stay with you, Dr. Gray. What qualities do you look for when choosing a research assistant? Do you expect them to have some experience, or are you okay with them, approaching you with no experience?
So I have students working with me all across that spectrum, and I actually like that advice related to just volunteering even an hour. I have a student who reviews one article every 2 weeks. We meet every other week. She just wanted a little bit of experience to find out if research was for her, all the way through thesis advising and build and other funded research programs. So finding, and the other thing that little piece can do for you is to find out if you work well with that mentor, right? It helps to assess their style. So I'm pretty straightforward with people who come to me with research interest. I'm not a micromanager. I love it when students have their own ideas too. So certainly I can set them up with tasks related to my research, but I'm also willing to support. My current build mentee was really interested in caffeine. She developed her own study related to caffeine use in college students. So I look for self-direction inquisitiveness, I love talking about ideas, and then a team approach. I think I learned as much from my students as they learned from me, and so and I enjoy getting to know my students as people too. So yeah, just having those conversations early to find out what they're looking for. I always ask students like, what would you like to gain through this research relationship? Am I the best person to help you do that? Or is there someone else too? So yeah, self-direction, organization, inquisitiveness, and team approach are the main.
Oh, that's really, really insightful. And like for kind of like the technical skills that they bring, or not skills, but like for like the technical process of joining a lab, would you say you would recommend students to typically like email you with their interest and their intent? Would you say you would recommend them to approach you in person? And would you maybe call them for some sort of informal or formal interview? How would that kind of look?
Yeah, usually students just send an email saying, I have learned about this thing you're doing and I'm interested in talking about it. So then I just invite them to come to my chat.
Okay. And no sort of like resume, or you don't expect anything like that?
Personally, and they just say they're interested and then we get together and talk.
Okay. That's really good to know. And taking it to you, Dr. Taylor, what qualities do you look for in a research assistant?
Yeah, so I work with students through the URA program mostly. I don't expect students to have any training or experience in research coming in. I don't know if I'm different in that aspect. I recognize students coming in probably aren't going to have research experience. I look for, number one, eagerness in students to learn and to dive in. That's like, and usually when I interview or meet with a student, I can tell within like the first couple minutes how eager someone is to do this. I look for someone who takes the initiative. So once we're on a team together, we're working on a project, I'm not the one having to follow up with them to get updates on the work they're doing. They're taking the initiative to like update me. We're scheduling meetings, usually for my team bi-weekly, but if we need to meet more than that, they're taking the initiative to reach out. Organization skills as well is huge. I would say eagerness and organization skills. Oftentimes we're managing large data sets. Sage knows, Sage is my research assistant. We're managing large data sets, different research participants. We have many different moving pieces at one time. So organization skills is huge. So I'd say eagerness and organization skills are what I really look for. And then the technical skills honestly kind of come secondary. I tell students in all of my classes, not just for research, but hiring anything. I would much rather hire or choose a student who is eager, willing to learn, but maybe doesn't have the research skills, compared to someone who maybe has the technical skills, but is not eager and super engaged and wanting to learn. Always will choose the person who's eager.
Okay, definitely. And what does the process for you kind of look like when you take on someone in your lab? Do you interview them? Is it very casual or more formal?
So usually students reach out via email. We set up a meeting to meet. I just kind of want to get to know them a little bit more. Other times it is maybe more casual. Maybe I have a spot and I know a specific student is really interested. So, but usually people reach out via email and I like to sit down and meet with them before we formalize it.
Right. And would you recommend kind of adding anything to that email or a resume or kind of something that makes that person a little bit more exceptional in your decision?
I always think it's beneficial if you're reaching out to someone, especially if they don't know you don't know them very well, to attach a resume. I think it's beneficial. Send a very, very professional email explaining who you are, your major, your interests, and why specifically you're reaching out to that faculty. I can tell when students are maybe kind of sending the same email to like 10 different people. Make sure if you send an email, you crafted specifically to the person you're sending it to. Say specifically what about their work interests you.
Makes a lot of sense. And let's say someone were to, just find your page on the faculty website. They're not a student that you know. Would you still find that acceptable to just cold email you and want to talk about joining your lab?
Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think I'm crafting that email so that I know specifically they've maybe done a little work on their end to know what I study and the work I do, as opposed to just like a more general email. I'm gonna be much more excited about meeting with them if I can tell they did some background work on their end.
Right, that makes sense. Thank you. And so to take it to you, what qualities do you look for when choosing a research assistant?
Yeah, so I guess because we're experimentalists, a lot of our effort, and in my department, we do not have grad students, is in lab next door, so he sees that we interact a lot. Our efforts require a lot of work, like actual, physical work. And because everyone's time as undergraduate scholars is limited, kind of like in my lab, we have clusters that folks are owners of a project. So to echo what was said before, teamwork becomes really important. And by that, I have very specific things that I have in mind. It's like if you call and you're going to say, I'm going to do something, try to be self-directed, be goal-driven. If something fails, it's okay. Just be transparent about it. To kind of I'm a bit nerd, so that's part of that. I don't like Star Wars as a frame of reference for life because I think it's really horrible. It's good movies, right? But like everyone's on their own journey. There's like hero journey. I find that very useless in everyday life. I really like Star Trek. Because, I feel like that everyone is on their own journey, but collectively Starfleet has its problems. But they're kind of pushing in the same direction. That's how I think about, actually, in all honesty, about my lab. There's I think about it in that context, that I wish for us to be more like Starfleet than Star Wars. With respect to interviews, I don't actually have any particular things that I look for. It just depends on the project and the person. I like people who are goal driven. I like if folks have looked up what we do so that we can have a productive conversation as opposed to having to too assertive and talkative, which happens. The other thing that I find very useful is I like the professional email. A suggestion I have is that don't open your professional email by saying, I am Siavash, the second year. All of that can be in your signature. We all get a lot of emails. I think shorter is actually going to elicit more response. One wish that I have for folks who reach out to me is to talk with another professor before joining my lab. Because I think sometimes people like to join my lab because they think they like me in the context of the course. And I don't think my course version and my lab version are not necessarily, the same person. The moment asks for different things, right? So I feel like it's really useful to talk with at least two people in the field that you are interested in. I think actually that Ariela's lab. If I were a student in PME, I wanted to join Perla's lab because I think they're incredibly successful, they're very thoughtful, there's very good mentorship, right? But maybe you care about the projects that my lab has, right? So it's just good to have options. In life, it's always good to have options, right? So you have to create those options, right? And my wish for everyone is at least to talk with one more person or committed.
So that makes sense. And so you would recommend just looking at faculty on websites and cold emailing them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Or also just, I think sometimes talking with, I guess my school posts my college posts all of our office hours online. I wouldn't mind people showing up to office hours and talking about research. That would actually make me very happy. But as long as they've read about the work that you're doing, so that I don't have to lecture. So.
And if I may interrupt, my apologies. You mentioned that you don't recommend in your emails introducing yourself. My name is But I feel like in a lot of research programs and just in general, they recommend doing that as the beginning of your email. What would you recommend instead? Like, how would you structure that email?
So I guess maybe I took this UW course on how to write professional emails, and this has stayed with. So I think when I read, like, so your name can be in your signature. I think like, I'm a second year, like blank student looking for a research position orients me to receive what comes after for the rest of the email. And I think that's more important for what you're, like, if you think about what is the ask is an interview, right? The successful email just gets you your interview so you can talk, right? It doesn't matter, like, maybe it's not, like, to me, it doesn't matter what our name is at this point, right? I just want to, if I have like, a lot of emails, I'm just trying to figure out what is my response to them, right? So that's my 2 cents. I'm not, religious about this. I think it just tends to work better for me.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And that's one thing that I've kind of had to become accustomed to is like shortening it as much as you
Right.
can when you're reaching out because they're so busy. And they are interested in what you have to say, but in my opinion, the less as getting more information in there, but less, wordy, if that makes sense. Do you recommend attaching a resume or
Yeah, I
something
think
like that?
that's helpful. I genuinely think the successful email, right, is the one that gets you your talk. So that's, like you can calibrate and see how those emails kind of like what is the response to them. I feel like that the community here is very nice in general. Like, so, when I was an undergrad in R1 setting, I have to send a lot of emails before I got one response. I do my best to respond to all of them. Sometimes things slip through. But I think community here is really
That's very true.
Can I touch on something?
Please,
He sparked an idea that I wanted to. You mentioned going to office hours, and I second that. I think that can be really beneficial. Something that I think is successful for students who go to office hours is making sure you come with a list of questions or talking points, so that you can kind of guide the conversation and help navigate the conversation rather than maybe just showing up and expecting the faculty to share about their work, like go with specific questions you have or discussion prompts written down. I think that can be helpful.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. Thank you for that. To take it to our last question, and we'll start with you again, Siavash. What does a student faculty mentorship look like to you? And how can prospective or current students, researchers foster relationships with faculty members? And I guess we'll stick with the first part of the question. What does that relationship look like to you? What does that mentorship look like to you in the sense of do you communicate once a week? Do you meet once a week?
Yeah.
How's that kind of look?
I sometimes over communicate, which is like I actually have a rule that I should not Slack message anyone after 8 p.m. But sometimes it's just like I apologize, I have to tell you this. It just it's that. But so I have this framework that I look at every 6 months. That just it's like what I want people to have out of my life. It's not perfect, but it's like a set of questions that I ask myself, like how are we doing collectively? It just turns out that people are different. So it just I don't have one approach that works with everyone. Some people are incredibly self-directed, motivated. I don't have to do anything. I have to sometimes even fight them to do less so that they're focused. Some people kind of start incredibly excited and then the decay function is really fast and they fizzle, which is bad. So I have to motivate them. So I don't know, like maybe with more time, like I have more thoughts on this. But what works best for you is to manage up, so to speak. I have a very interesting, weird relationship with my PhD advisor. We are not best of friends. We have known each other now for, I guess, 10 years, 10 years plus, but we're very productive together. Our personalities are really different. It's almost like a clashy point. But we have an open relationship that, like, sometimes when we bat on my end, I tell him like exactly what I think. And then he tells me, is like, you cannot tell me that. That's not a good thing. but I think that has worked for us. Alternatively, other people in his lab have had different relationships where they were closer together, but were less productive together. Where I'm going with this is that I don't, and I've had other mentors that are I really like them as people, as human beings, but they're not very good mentors to me because they've like maybe sheltered me too much or kind of like, I don't know. But essentially, to me, like I care about folks in my lab as people a lot, like as who they are as people. But also as a mentor, I have a responsibility to help them achieve their goals, which sometimes require to give them critical feedback, which is never pleasant. Like I'm reading our reviewer feedback this week, which is not pleasant, it's horrible, right? The reviewer is like, thank you for that. So you know, and I post all of that, such as it is in our Slack, so people see it. And it's like, this is what we got back, right? And I feel bad about this, but we have to deal with it, and we can't yell at them back. We can yell at them here, right, in a in a private meeting. It's like that's too bad. But you know, so the idea here is that I think this is kind of like a profession. What I mean by that is that you want a productive relationship. Maybe sometimes it's also pleasant, but sometimes maybe it isn't, right? But it's productive. So, and I think that to me has been the optimization for myself. I don't tell people what to do, right? That's on my list. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your.
It does, and you have a good point that having a mentor it's a bi-directional relationship where you're there to help with their lab and they're there to help you with either graduation or industry or applying to grad school. And that's a letter of recommendation that you can one of the best letter of recommendations you can use because it's the person you're directly working under. So it really is bi-directional, and they're there to help you. Like my mentor and the faculty from Build helped me with more than I think anybody in my life has ever helped me with anything. Like emails every few hours at some points of the semester. So they're really there to help.
Definitely, something that stands out to me. I think folks in my lab that are part of the same cluster, like they're peer, like they're a group of people that work together and like work on their applications together. I think actually your peers are more valuable in many ways because they're going through what you're going through. There's more of you than us. So I think in a way, like mentoring or seeking support, maybe mentoring is the wrong word, seeking support like in a lateral way than a vertical way is actually very good. And it's oftentimes a very undervalued resource. I think folks in my lab, this cohort are very successful because they supported each other as a community more so than what I could do. I was just one person, right? There was 5 of them, right? So I think that was very productive. So I think that's often an undervalued resource that is available.
So you have about 5 members in your lab.
We are now somehow 12, but
Okay.
it's not an advantage for like I think Phil is not.
They have at least 15.
Oh wow.
No, we're at 12 and we meet, but yeah.
And that's relatively larger lab, would you say?
I don't know, to be honest. I think it's average in BME, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that our lab is the largest.
Yeah.
And so you do meet in groups, or is it more individual?
We do both. We have cluster meetings for every people's project, and then we have one-on-one meetings. I can never get everyone to show up for a lab meeting because y'all schedule never works out. So the only time that it's available is Friday at 5, which I decided not to do. Maybe that's for grad school. I have to keep out of the lab every Friday at 6. Like you have this conversation that's like not grad school yet, but.
And what does the lab work kind of look like? Does it, change throughout their time in your lab? Do you start with having them read articles and getting familiar with the work? I know with biomedical engineering, every field is so different. So is it more technical skills right away? How does that look for them?
So I've tried multiple, and I'm so sorry, I don't mean to I just feel like that in lab we have done it different ways. One thing that has been disappointing, and I don't know if this feels the same for you, is that why don't y'all read? That's my biggest fight every week with everyone in the lab. It's like, okay, did you read? And in the class, it's like, so I've given up on that fight. So we start with more like hands-on things that is exciting, and then we trick people into reading. Yeah.
Smart.
I know it's not working. That's just how it's, yeah,
Well, thank you so much.
no worries.
Dr. Taylor, what does an ideal faculty mentorship look like to you? How often do you meet, kind of those sort of things?
So we usually meet, my work is a bit different where we don't have to be on the campus doing it. So we usually meet, would you say, every couple weeks, usually Sage. Every couple weeks we meet either on campus or Zoom. I would say it's usually more successful when we can meet in person. I think that the faculty mentee relationship is maybe usually fostered a bit better when we can meet in person, but sometimes we meet on Zoom. And then kind of between meetings, we work independently, kind of when it fits your own time. That's just the type of work that we do. Oftentimes it's working on a lit review or collecting data or whatever it is. And then we come back every couple weeks, debrief together, talk about challenges we face, questions, new ideas, and then we kind of go our own separate ways for a week or two, come back together.
Do you kind of, or I have a little follow-up question. Do you expect your mentees to reach out to you and take that initiative, or do you kind of have that planned, we meet bi-weekly sort of thing?
We try when we meet to kind of schedule our next meeting, but I do expect them as they're working to reach out with questions or to kind of send updates. I think that keeps us on the right track. So, and that kind of gets back to the taking initiative piece. I don't like to be chasing people down, wondering, hey, how's this going? Hey, what's going on here? So I do expect people to be keeping me updated. Right.
How many mentees are in your lab?
So your lab seems gigantic. I was like, wow, that is huge. Usually 2 to 3. 2 to 3. I think that's just kind of how my field is though. I don't know about you.
A lot too.
You
Really?
really too? Okay.
Mine has about 3.
Okay.
But what does your lab work typically look like? Does it really change throughout their time there, or do you kind of?
It depends on what we're doing at the time. I'm really big on, I like to expose students to as much of the research process as possible. So starting with lit reviews to kind of orient students to the topics we're studying, the issues we're addressing, to data collection. So my students, Sage and my other assistant this semester collected about 30 in-depth interviews in, a couple months. So just collecting data to then how do we organize and analyze the data to then writing up and publishing, presenting. So I like to expose students to the entire process. I don't know if this answers your question, but to me, it's really important that, and it gets kind of at the bi-directional relationship. Students, we do a lot of also, not a lot, but professional development and career development work. So we spend some of our meetings just specifically talking about how does this work you've been doing connect to what you want to do when you graduate. I recognize a lot of students who work with me don't want to be family scientists and they don't want to be college professors. Maybe they want to be psychologists or go to law school or whatever it is. How can we craft that on your resume, the skills and the work you're doing to really connect specifically to what you want to do? That's really important to me, and that's integrated into the work that we do together.
It's a great skill to have too. And how many hours a week can you kind of expect students to be able to commit to your lab work?
I think URA, you can work up to 12. Is it 12? So that's 10 to 12 is ideal. But again, if someone just wants to volunteer, dip their toes in, figure out if this is what they want to do. I mean, I kind of accommodate, if someone's really interested and eager, I try and accommodate, even if it's just an hour or 2 a week.
Right. So thank you. And Dr. Gray, what does a ideal mentorship look like to you?
I echo the team piece, just working, together as a team. I have students who work on various capacities, and one of the reasons I have a lot of students is because I directed the graduate program in nutrition for 10 years and just passed that on, but I've still got a lot of the students working on theses and projects with me. And then I also connect to the grant that I direct on our campus is not a research grant, it's an applied grant. So it's a nutrition education grant, but I tie my research to that. So I have students who work on that grant that are delivering the nutrition education. And then I have students that are helping with research that that relates to that. So and the students who work with me, some of them I meet with weekly, some every other week, and then some like one of the groups that when I'm working with groups of students in theses, we meet together as a group once a month and plan things out. So there's kind of different.
How many
meeting
people
schedules.
are in your lab? Sorry, cut you off. So you kind of juggle it in all different directions with whoever needs one at that time. And is their work very different? I know you said you have them working on specific projects, but do you typically have them start with literature reviews, like reading articles, or do you get them involved in data collection, or what does that look like?
It depends on the needs of the student and what capacity they're working with me. So undergrads, I just usually have like 3 undergrads that work with me, and then they actually tend to devote the most time because they're in some of these funded programs, and so often they are involved in data collection and data analysis. Some of my grad students are developing things that usually relate to the topic of food insecurity. And college students, but some of them are doing really applied work, like one's developing a guide for students with food allergies to use in on-campus dining. Yeah, so various.
And do you expect your students to take initiative to schedule those meetings and reach out to you, or is it more like a set thing that you have, like you make it set at your previous meeting, or? We
usually have we at the beginning of the year we're meeting every Tuesday at this time for those that are meeting with weekly, or if it's bi-weekly, or the ones that are meeting with me once a month. We just set the schedule at the beginning of the semester.
Okay, got it. And that slipped my mind. I had one last question. Gosh, sorry.
The thought related to this question though. It's okay.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
So when you were talking about collaboration, I love when students bring again back to the ideas piece in. I'm just one example of that. We just had a paper published with 2 of my undergrads in our leading journal, and it's showcasing kind of the foray of this nutrition education program that's been funded for 30 years with college students. And so the student who was working with me, she also worked at the Department of Health at the same time, and she was in their trauma, in the unit that was addressing trauma in communities, and she brought this resource in to one of our meetings, and it's become a pivotal part. That resource has been a pivotal piece of training future students in trauma-informed nutrition education, and it came to me through a student, right? So that collaboration and like the student coming in with an idea, like look what I saw, and could this apply to our work?
I have a question. Was it Taylor by any chance, or?
It was Christina Zuniga.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She's in an MPH program at CSULB now.
I had a question to add on to that. Okay.
Yeah.
I know in my work with Dr. Taylor, you definitely guide us towards what we're doing, but in general we have a lot of free range. So we decide how we store the data collection, we decide exactly what path the research is taking in a big and I feel like in a pretty major way. Do you do that similar thing with your students where you kind of let them lead the direction, or do you have a guideline and they kind of follow the tasks?
It depends, again, on what the student needs. So the example of that project that I just shared with you, this was already going on with a system of 9 CSUs, and so I recruited students to come in and collect those data. But then, other students who have an idea they want to explore, sometimes I present a general idea. Just the 2 students I've met with recently, they both have cooking experience. They worked as a chef for 10 years, and so coming into this work, nutrition education, we do cooking classes. They're bringing that in, and so I presented here's 3 different things that we're thinking about doing in the future. Which of these is interesting to you? So then we can co-develop the path ahead. So it varies, and sometimes it's a student saying, "I really want to do this," and it's not totally what you're doing. Would you support it? So I've got all 3 of those kind of paths.
Thank you.
Can I speak to something? It popped into my head. So oftentimes, I know with my team, we collect a data set that's like pretty large and maybe we're working on a specific part. Maybe there's another part that you're really interested in exploring. I think I like when students express that, like, hey, would it be okay if I'm really interested in presenting at this conference? Could I maybe look at this subset of data for that? And I'm always like, yes, absolutely, that'd be great. So I think that kind of what my co-panelists are saying. um, I think a lot of faculty are open to students maybe kind of, if it still relates, but kind of veering off into their own interest areas as well.
Thank you. So we have about 5 minutes left for any last minute questions that students would like to ask that we maybe didn't cover. If you could just say your name and your major and any question that you have. And while people are maybe thinking about questions, is there any last piece of advice that maybe didn't cover that either any of you would like to add?
Drop a lot when Carla talks with her students because we share strengths and she's a awesome mentor. One thing I've heard she say, which I think I now have borrowed and I credit to, is that she says that you just need one good result a week or one result a week. And I think that's a healthy way of thinking about it, right? At the beginning, it just seems very scary, right? But like, if you think about it, if you have one analyzed result, like fortnightly, like a week, that's a very productive framework to kind of move something forward.
Right. And if you choose something you're interested in, it makes that process more enjoyable, and when it applies to your major, it kind of benefits you in school as well. So I think research can seem intimidating because you already have like full-time school, and then a lot of people have to work, and then doing research on top of that seems like almost impossible. But when it has to do with your schoolwork, it can kind of balance things out a little bit, benefit you.
I'd say too, just don't undersell your own value. Like that's one of the things that's so fun about research on this campus that's really working to improve the diversity of perspectives that is brought in, is you will have life experience and value that adds to the beauty of what we're able to accomplish. So go into it with that and keep telling yourself, struggle with any sort of, we all struggle with feelings of, oh my gosh, someone's really important, they're doing this work, you're important too. And just keep reminding yourself of your value.
If I may add, that's okay. Just the topic of research, I would definitely say look at research that isn't directly in your major as well. Because as a first year in Europe, I was a biology major, and then I interviewed with Dr. Taylor and the topic about victims of domestic violence, and then I changed my major. Now I'm going to law school, which is not biology related at all. So if you have an interest somewhere that you're like, I don't know if I want to do that for a career, look into research is definitely the perfect aspect to look more into those topics and see, is this something that I might want to do professionally? So keep your mind open when you're talking to professors.
I know as well as just joining a lab, there's also research programs on campus. So if anyone's interested in those, please contact or come up to us directly or email CSULB or URA, CSULB@gmail.com. We have it up here at the end as well. I know that URA applications still
URA somewhere. It usually opens in June and the deadline is August. Late August or early.
And then there's also Ours Connect, which is open all year.
Yes,
right?
just downstairs.
Just downstairs. And a reason why it's kind of good to get involved in some program is just because they do provide guidance, like extra guidance, in the sense of they kind of also hold you accountable in a little bit of a way to really reach out to faculty and kind of tell you how, and also will help you with making a your resume for grad school, writing your application letters for grad school, or asking people for letters of recommendation. So having that, your mentor will help you with that, but it's always better to have more resources as possible. So Ours Connect is a really good one where you don't need any experience.
No.
Yeah.
And it's open to any year, any major. They set you up with a peer mentor. I think it's once a month, so it's very low key. They're very nice about are like kind of steering you in the right direction. Like, so there's so many resources at school that sometimes you get inundated with like emails and you just like kind of pass them through, but just take a second if you can look through emails. There's so many programs, they're really good about giving you deadline dates and extend on some occasions extending them. So just keep an eye. So there's a lot of research.
You can look up CSULB research programs. I think there's 12 in total, and I know a lot of them they have some like you have to be a junior or senior. Some of them I think you have to be a freshman or sophomore. So there are like some qualifications, but there's plenty of them, and ours Connect is one that will take anybody who wants to get involved. Do you have any last questions or any last final words? Thank you all for coming.
We're so excited.
Sorry. As an introvert, hard to that outside of town. So I was just curious how best to or like any tips that we have for
So as a fellow introvert, I will say, is your question, like if you're wanting to connect with the faculty to get involved? So I think starting off an email, it can feel like a little safer sometimes. And then when you do have a meeting or an interview can sound so scary and intimidating. Think of it like just a meeting to see if it's a good fit. And so for me, and I shared writing down questions or discussion prompts, because that's what helps me when I go into a meeting with people not feel as like nervous or, oh gosh, I'm gonna forget, everything that I thought of, and writing it down. So I think also, slipped my head. I don't know if anyone else has.
writing it down.
It'll come back to me. Yeah, write it down so you don't, it doesn't slip your head. I don't know if anyone else has.
A lot of us are introverts that might not, like people sometimes are surprised to find them an introvert. So I've kind of developed a functional extroversion, but a lot of us are, so a lot of us sympathize, but when I agree with what Dr. Taylor said, write these down.
I think emails can seem less scary and like run your emails by a friend. That's what I love to do. Just as many people as you want. And then that helps you feel more confident about what you say.
That helps. Thank you.
And sorry, one last, if you reach out to us too, we're great to help you with that. Like how to write an email for a prompt. I think we actually included that on one of our slides in the last presentation. So when we share our folder too, we can kind of tell you where that is, but it actually gives you an example of emails we've written to join labs. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, something that also might help you to feel like more comfortable going into a meeting is when you do that background research, like reading about the person you're meeting with, noting down some ideas that stand out to you or some interesting points you might want to ask them about. And so for me personally, I'm always more comfortable and confident going in when I feel like I've prepped myself for it, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
Advice that Dr. Taylor actually gave me on the topic. I think I'm remembering what you forgot.
Oh, yeah, like, I was just here.
Is that when you're meeting a faculty, like either a potential mentor, it's 50-50 of them trying to get to know you, but you're trying to get to know if they're compatible with your interests just as much. So it's not like you're sitting there waiting for them to ask you questions. You're trying to get to know them. You're trying to get to know, like, are you guys compatible? Can I work with this person? And even if they do offer you a position, you may decide afterwards that you don't believe you're compatible with their interest or with maybe their personality or however it works. So I think that's really important. It takes a little pressure off as well because you have decision making.
That's what I meant.
Any final questions? Well, thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to our faculty members.
Thank you.
We have their emails up here. We share those if anybody has any follow-up questions. Also, we have URA board positions that are open for next semester. We have 5 positions. There's like the president, the vice president of finances, the outreach and events coordinator, which is like this.
Yeah.
Which is like the like social media, or publicity chair, which is like the social media, outreach and events coordinator, which is kind of like the liaison between the organization and the school. And then
The other chair.
Administrative chair, which is kind of like the person who does some technical stuff, like takes notes at our meetings. You can kind of call it like a secretary, but administrative chair is the name of the role. So you can scan the QR code if you are interested in yourself, want to nominate yourself, or want to nominate anyone you know who might be interested. We will send emails tomorrow to make sure those people would like to commit to the role. So just because you nominate someone doesn't mean they're going to be, voted for. We'll still run it by them. But that does close today. So feel free to scan that or share it with people you know. And then our de-stress event, and also the voting where we will be meeting on, the meeting where we will be voting on our officer members is next Monday from 11 to 12, May 6th in this safe room.
Would it be okay if I took a photo of you? Or Instagram? Is that okay?
Yeah. And regret not.
Thank you so much.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you all.
And y'all are welcome to stay, grab snacks, or if you want to ask this question, we'll be here for a little bit after as well.
You're also welcome to stay and study since it's
Yeah.
purposeful.
There's a poster session happening in the family consumer science courtyard right now.
Oh,
If anybody wants to.
We have some
see the
gifts
poster.
for faculty speakers.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate you.
It's my semester.
Yeah, thank you all.
So much for
Goes on the Zoom. If you want to sign in, you can use this QR code that's shown here.
I love it.
Thank you for coming, everybody.
I'll get there right now.